Welcome to the Cinema Gold Show. I'm your host, Larry Leese, and on today's episode, we're going to dive into the latest box office numbers and headlines from around the industry. But first, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Pondex, for sponsoring this episode. If you're a fan of podcasts or looking to grow your own podcast, check out Pondex today at pondex.com. Use the promo code Larry21 to save you 10% off your order. And of course, you can find us on all major social media platforms. Just search Cinema Gold Show. And now on to our first topic. The Super Mario Brothers movie had a phenomenal second box office weekend and did something no other 2023 blockbuster has done. The Super Mario Brothers movie most definitely crushed it in its opening weekend, but its remarkable success is not just being limited to what can be written off as a front-load start. While all of the biggest hits of the year thus far have dealt with a weekend-to-weekend drop over 50% following their debuts, the Nintendo feature has broken from that pattern. Since the return of movie-going after COVID-19 pandemic shut down cinemas worldwide, big problem facing blockbusters has been a repeating pattern of big openings followed by big drops, a result of the shrinking window between theatrical release and streaming home video debut. The films released by Marvel Studios, for example, have made headlines because of their weekend-to-weekend issues since 2021's Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, falling 70% earlier this year. But the Super Mario Brothers movie has impressed by only dropping 41% compared to the numbers from its first Friday to Sunday. The new movie, based on the Nintendo franchise, had a record-breaking $146.4 million domestic debut opening in the first weekend of March, and then it's followed up that performance by adding another $87 million in ticket sales since Friday. That drop is even smaller than what Michael B. Jordan's Creed 3 did in early March, and all the more impressive because the numbers are much bigger. The blockbuster has already become the biggest box office hit of the young year, having made $347.8 million, second place belonging to Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Not only is the Super Mario Brothers movie the biggest movie of the year so far domestically, but it has also earned that title globally. It's made $678 million thus far, putting itself ahead of Full River Red, which made nearly all of its $673 million during its theatrical run in China. In addition to performing well in the US, the video game adaptation, according to the numbers, made $28 million in Mexico, $13 million in China, almost $20 million in the UK, $17.5 million in Germany, $13 million in France, and it will not get a theatrical release in Japan, the home of Nintendo, until the end of the month. As we will discuss further very soon, what makes the success of the Super Mario Brothers movie in the last 3 days particularly notable is that it was accomplished during a very crowded week at the box office. Multiple new releases hit theaters, including Renfield, and the big franchise titles of March, including John Wick Chapter 4 and Scream 6, are still selling tickets. The Super Mario Brothers movie, however, is really the only title aiming at young kids, and as a result, it was able to dominate the top 10. And now that the big test of the weekend is out of the way, it may continue to dominate for the rest of the month. There are certainly some interesting titles set to be released in April, but it's likely that the animated hit will retain its position as the number one movie in America until the arrival of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 in May. As far as studio scheduling is concerned, there were a few questionable decisions made this past weekend. For starters, there's a suggestion that the draw of the Super Mario Brothers was underestimated, as the week following a major blockbuster release is typically lacking in major releases. And as for the films that were put in head-to-head competition, like we mentioned, Renfield and The Pope's Exorcist are both R-rated horror titles aimed at the same demographics. The end result of these questionable logistical decisions, no title other than Super Mario Brothers, was able to make over 8 figures. The Pope's Exorcist was the most successful of the non-Mario group, making an estimated $9.2 million, though it's still short of hitting its reported budget of $18 million. It's not a great outcome, but it is better than Renfield's situation. The movie received a mostly positive response from critics, particularly highlighting the performance by Nicolas Cage, but it only brought in $7.8 million during its first 3 days of theatrical release. And it's a feature that was made with a $65 million budget. We'll see what happens with these titles in the weeks ahead, but for now we're just left wondering if both films could have better success if held for release in the fall during spooky season. I'll lastly highlight the performance by Ari Aster's Beau is Afraid this past weekend, though you'll note that the title is absent from the top 10. This is because it only managed to make $320,000. That probably doesn't look like a lot in box office terms, but what makes that number stand out is the fact that it's ticket sales from just 4 locations. Beau is Afraid is the follow-up to Hereditary and Midsommar, and was given a very small debut in New York and Los Angeles. And the end result is a new indie record for the year. The movie made a stunning $80,000 per theater, which is actually the second biggest average ever put up by an A24 release, following Uncut Gems on 5 screens in December 2019. How will the film do when it goes nationwide starting on Friday? It's hard to say, especially because it has been getting an extremely polarized response from critics and audiences. In addition to Beau is Afraid, this upcoming Friday we'll also see the arrival of Lee Cronin's Evil Dead Rise, Guy Ritchie's The Covenant, and Stephen Williams' Chevalier. Be sure to head back here next Sunday to learn what they end up placing in the top 10. And before we move on to our next topic, let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. What did you think of this week's box office numbers? Was there any surprises that you saw besides Mario Brothers? And to recap for the top 10, starting out at number 1 was the Super Mario Brothers, followed by The Pope's Exorcist, then John Wick Chapter 4, Renfield at number 4, Air at number 5, 6 at number Dungeons and Dragons, number 7 is Suzume, number 8 is Mafia Mama, number 9 is Scream 6, and 10 is Nefarious. And now on to our next topic. Netflix is eyeing a director for its U.S. version of Squid Game. Reports of a U.S. version of Squid Game have been swirling for some time, but according to Above the Line's Jeff Snyder, Netflix already has eyes on a director. In a recent tweet, Snyder mentioned that Netflix is courting director David Fincher to produce and direct the American version of Squid Game. Snyder went on to mention that it's unclear whether or not Fincher is even interested in the project, but Netflix has their eyes set on him and wants him to handle it. Previous reports from Snyder suggested that Netflix was interested in making an American version of the show, although Snyder noted that he didn't know what a U.S. version of Squid Game would look like. However, he did mention that some audiences' insistence on not watching foreign language properties is another thing that could make Netflix lean into remaking the series. Squid Game centers around a group of 456 cash-strapped players who accepted a strange invitation to compete in children's games on a remote island in hopes of winning $456 billion. However, they'll soon find out that the prize comes with deadly high stakes. Let us know your thoughts on a possible Squid Game version for the U.S. Were you a fan of it? Do you think it'll work? I honestly... I don't think it really will. I feel like U.S. remakes of foreign shows have been kind of a hit and miss. I mean, like the biggest one of all, I think, is The Office. And you can debate whether one's better than the other. But there were moments in the U.S. version of The Office that I think didn't work compared to the British version. Let us know. And now on to the next topic. Sonic the Hedgehog's spin-off series, Knuckles, is speeding into production. The cinematic world of Sonic the Hedgehog continues to expand as production began on a television spin-off focused on Knuckles, the explosive character voiced by Idris Elba. After being introduced to Sonic and his friends during the events of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, Knuckles is set to live out his own adventures. where he'll get to know his own group of secondary characters before the franchise returns to the big screen next year. Behind the scenes, some familiar faces will be returning to this world, as the same crew that has worked on the 2 movies will also be a part of this spin-off. Jeff Howler, who has stepped behind the camera for both the Sonic Hedgehog movies, will be in charge of directing the pilot episode of Knuckles, telling the story of the protagonist on a hilarious action-packed journey of self-discovery, as he agrees to train Wade, played by Adam Pauly, as his protege and teach him the ways of the Echidna warrior. Other cast members that will be joining the fun is Julian Barrett, Scott Mescudi, Ellie Taylor, and Rory McCann. Since production for the series began last month, it is possible that it will be launched on the platform before the 3rd Sonic movie races into theaters. While the first Sonic movie hit the big screen a few weeks before the pandemic caused movie theaters to be closed for more than a year, it still managed to be successful at the box office before the lockdown, added to a good performance on digital platforms some time after that. The results made Paramount confident in developing a sequel, which would be released 2 years after the adaptation introduced the world to this version of the lovable character. When the second installment was also very profitable, the studio realized they had a franchise in their hands, which was a perfect candidate for expansion across different media. When a studio is in control of intellectual property with years' worth of material they can explore, it is expected for them to try and develop as much content as they can. But since the crew behind the Sonic movies and the upcoming Knuckles television series has proved through their work that they deeply care about the characters and they won't create a project solely with the intention of expanding the franchise. For now, there's only the 3rd Sonic installment coming to theaters December 20th, 2024 on the horizon. If the upcoming projects continue to be a success for Paramount and Sega, don't be surprised if the lovable Hedgehog and his friends return for more adventures. After all, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 is going to have some tough competition. And now we are going to give our review of the Super Mario Bros. Movie. From its cheesy, nostalgic-crafted details meant to spark joy from the jump, it's hard to pinpoint exactly when the movie's intangible magic, the general feeling, rather than the movie's actual magic, first kicks in. But as the Mario Brothers jump, flip, and twirl their way across town on foot in an early action sequence, styled after the classic Mario side-scrollers, you can immediately get a sense of just how serious the movie is about translating the essence of its source material into something that feels familiar but also like its own distinct quantity. This ends up being the case with most of the Super Mario Bros. Movies' complex set pieces, which doesn't come as a surprise given Illumination's track record and Nintendo's reputation for being extremely protective of its brands. What does come as something of a shock, though, is how genuinely inoffensive Brett and Dave's take on Mario and Luigi are. A concern that movie addresses head-on with some solid gags and a textual explanation as to why Mario occasionally sounds like he might have spent some time in Pawnee, Indiana. As much information about the movie as the film lays out before their journey across the galaxy, it's far more reserved about others like Bowser, played by Jack Black, and his sorcerer, Kamek, played by Kevin Michael Richardson, who serve as hemi villain foils to the Mushroom Kingdom's Princess Peach, played by Anya Taylor-Joy, and her loyal subject Toad, played by Keegan-Michael Key. If you've played through the games like Super Mario World or Super Mario Odyssey, then the general shape of the movie's plot will be obvious from the moment you first hear why Bowser is so hell-bent on getting his hands on a certain star-shaped MacGuffin. The movie works through because as it's building towards its logical and very traditional Mario kind of ending, it uses every possible opportunity it has to make its various fantastical worlds feel like living, breathing, organic places that you'd want to spend hours exploring if they were part of an open-world video game. It's cool as hell every single time someone's outfit transforms after they ingest mushroom power-ups. But it's things like being able to see each of the individual seeds on a fire flower's face flicking like a candle that really make you appreciate how hard the movie's working to get things right. At times, it almost feels like Illumination might have gone overboard in terms of dotting its I's and crossing its T's for a movie that moves incredible fast and consistently has the air of something that's been crafted with children prone to rewatching the same thing in mind. But it's just as easy to interpret those things about the film as signs of how much more immersive and engaging Nintendo plans for its Mario theme park and future games to be. Watching the Super Mario Bros. Movie, it's impossible not to imagine what it might be like one day to play a game as visually rich, running on hardware that puts current gen Nintendo Switch to shame. That's probably part of the reason the movie exists. But as big budget commercials for video games and consoles go, the Super Mario Bros. Movie is going to be undefeated for quite some time. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. What did you think of the Super Mario Bros. Movie? Were you a fan of it? What would you say for a sequel? Like, what character would you feature in an upcoming film if they did a sequel? Let us know. And as always, thank you so much for watching and listening. If you want us to support the channel, buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/cinemagold. And until next time, take care.